If you're the parent of a child 12 years or older or trying to develop their leadership talents, you know that you have to treat them quite differently than you did a child. And yet at the same time, they are quite different than those of us who are older. So in this session, Dr. Tim Elmore is going to give us some insights into Gen Zers. He's going to help us understand them so that we unleash the potential and so that we can have a long-time relationship with them. I think this is essential. I've been friends with Tim Elmore for many years. My wife, Nancy, and Tim used to be on staff with John Maxwell. And so for many years, John was a mentor to Tim, but also now Tim has become a mentor and an asset to a lot of the people in his generation who are understanding leadership. I'm excited about what you're going to learn in this session with Dr. Tim Elmore.
Welcome to another edition of KidLead Academy Training Series with Dr. Alan E. Nelson, designed to help parents develop their children to lead so they can succeed. And now, here's Alan.
Hey, I'm happy to have as my guest today, Tim Elmore, Dr. Tim Elmore. Let me read a little bit of his bio, okay? It's a long one, so hang in there with me. Tim served for 20 years under John C. Maxwell before founding Growing Leaders in 2003. That's an Atlanta-based nonprofit organization created to help and develop emerging leaders. He is the author of 39, that's right, 39 books. And he's committed to equipping the next generation of leaders to not only be ready for real life, but to be life-giving as they lead. And since 2003, Growing Leaders has equipped 2.7 million students with leadership qualities and skills to be emotionally intelligent leaders. Wow. Tim speaks to businesses, universities, sports teams, secondary schools, and nonprofits in the U.S. And now he's been a speaker in 50 countries. That's a lot. His themes include leadership, serving on a multi-generational team, and how to engage the emerging generation. And so ultimately, his goal is to reach 1% of the world's youth and help them tackle life's issues. What I'm a little bummed, though, as I read that wonderful bio, is that he left out the most important thing, is that he and his wife, Pam, have been the godparents to our three sons. So I think you need to, I don't know, improve that, Tim. You didn't
Alan,
even start with that.
You had the short bio. You needed to get the long bio. That's right.
Anyway, hey man, thanks for joining me.
Oh, it is my honor to be with you, Alan. We have loved you and Nancy for decades, not years, decades. So it's an honor to be with you to have a conversation.
I think actually, if I recall right, I turned 65, so I've used up all my RAM. But I think we were actually married on the same day, same year, same hour. We were different time zones, but we figured it out. We were the same hour. And so we've gone on some trips that, to celebrate friendship and celebrate anniversaries. So it's been very, very fun.
It sure has. Absolutely.
And now I'm not interviewing you as my friend. I'm interviewing you as an expert of Gen Z and an expert in leadership. You have so much. So I'm really, really thankful that you're going to share that with some of our listeners and some of our viewers. So because you've written 39 books, we're going to kind of focus on one area, if that's okay. And the book titled Generation Z Unfiltered. Yeah. I think, that's so intriguing because our goal is to help parents develop their children as leaders, and that goes from ages 3 to 23. So obviously Gen Z is right in there with adolescence and teen years. And so talk to us a little bit about that. First, who is Generation Z and how are they different than the famous millennials?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a great question, and one that is not a science, but it's a social science. So Gen Z parents listening or teachers listening would be right now middle school, high school, college, and young professionals. So they're part of the K-12 experience. The alpha generation, as you know, Alan, would be the younger children all the way down to birth. And they're showing up even a little different than the Gen Zers. I mean, think about these kids that are younger are going to be growing up with AI talking to robots as adults as much as human beings, which I don't know if I like or not, but it's just a very, very different day than when we were growing up. So Gen Z would be the new kids on the block at work, for sure, but also kids under our roof that we've got to begin to develop, not just survive their childhood. So,
What are some of the characteristics of this generation? What makes them unique and different than
Yeah.
probably most of us understand?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to answer that question, and I'm going to add a little addendum. We're talking to more and more employers that are just frustrated rather than fascinated by them because they show up differently. So if I were to give you a 2-minute macro view of the data on Gen Z, it would be this. As teens and young adults, they're going to show up with a high sense of agency, but yet a high sense of anxiety at the same time, which seems oxymoronic. It's like, how could you have both?
I'm
So,
sorry. I'm sorry. So I understand agency, but define that for listeners who may be
yes.
unfamiliar. What do you mean by agency?
So when someone shows up at a job interview, may I get really practical here
Yeah.
with a sense of agency? The hiring manager may go, "You're a little cocky there, Josh. What's up with that?" So a sense of confidence and maybe even coming across a little arrogant. Alan, I just had an attorney friend say to me, he interviewed a recently graduated elite school 4.0 young lady. 15 minutes into the job interview, she said, "I'm going to have your job in 18 months." Now, she felt like she was coming across confident. He felt she was coming across arrogant.
Yeah.
But listen, moms and dads, they really do want to show they know. And they've been on YouTube, they've been on, Wikipedia, they've been on TikTok. So they are highly informed. But the anxiety level comes in just as bad. So, and I shouldn't say bad, but just as high. So everybody listening knows if you're around a young person, by and large, what's been normalized is anxiety disorders, panic attacks, even levels of depression. My two kids have both wrestled with depression, and they grew up in a good home with both mom and dad there, food on the table, great clothes. So, one last comment I'll add, Alan. High anxiety, high agency, I think both were deepened by smartphones. The thing that says, "I don't need your help," agency, and "I desperately need your help," anxiety. So on any given day, listeners, you might need to say, "I need to keep my hands off and let you grow." The next moment you may need to arm around their shoulder saying, "You can do this, Austin, you can do this." So it's a
Isn't that
very,
interesting?
yeah, it
I
really is.
just started. I just started listening to the audiobook, "The Anxious Generation,"
Yeah, John Howard.
where, as the statistics out there are sort of amazing. And when I was teaching. I taught 4 years part time at USC, and I know, and I'm just telling you what you already know. But they were telling the professors, "Hey, we're seeing increased suicides, attempted suicides." And I had my own students, undergrad students at the time, and they were just several of them were taking days off and they said, I'm having anxiety attacks, and
Yeah,
I'd never seen that before.
yeah.
And
It,
I know this is not a counseling session, right? But w- before we kind of go on, what would be some things that a parent who is seeing maybe some of these trends in their child could do to seek help or to help them?
yeah, great question, and one that deserves an hour, but I'm going to try to do it in 2 minutes. So there's a few things that are doable and free for moms and dads. One is we need to help them create margins. Their days are loaded with 17 extracurricular activities. I'm exaggerating, but I think we think to keep up with the Joneses or to my friends are doing this and doing that. They're taking karate, piano lessons, playing football. I think, well, I'll tell you what Pam and I did, and I think you and Nancy did this too. We said one extracurricular activity, not 17, pick one per semester. And by the way, if you sign up to play on that team, you finish the season, but you're not going to do a bunch. I think that's going to help their anxiety. Number two, I think they need to practice mindfulness where they are stopping and reflecting, not just reacting on social media. In fact, Jonathan Haidt, this NYU guy that wrote The Anxious Generation, he says no phones before 13, no social media before 16. So I just think that's data-driven advice. Now, some of you listening would go, "Well, I forget that. I've already lost that." But just know we need to share this information and say, "What do you think?" Alan, I remember sitting down with Jonathan, my son, when he was like 13, and I'd put a little article in front of him as we ate a burrito at Taco Bell. And he'd look at that and go, "I think I'm going to cut back on video games." But I didn't tell him. I said, it's your anxiety. It's your deal, buddy. So anyway, that would be a quick answer to some things I think mom and dad could do.
So and just that little anecdote there, Tim, I think that's awesome, and that's why that's why we love you and Pam, but we said if anything happened to us,
Yeah.
who would we feel comfortable raising? And just that little conversation was a snippet of the kind of things that I think more parents need to do, not just scold, but
Yeah.
to educate and inform and have, you know,
Yeah.
emotionally intelligent conversations with their kids that sometimes we just don't do as parents, and that's too bad.
Well,
Hey,
I need
go
to
ahead.
say, listeners, we wanted Alan and Nancy to be the godparents of our children. So we felt the very same way. You're going to develop them, not just survive childhood. And I so appreciate you've raised your boys and how you lead and how you're raising up families now to develop leaders. That's really cool.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So back to your book. In your book, you talk about 9 challenges facing Gen Z and those who lead them and those who live with them. Can
Yeah.
you share one or two of these challenges and maybe some things we can do?
Yeah. So one quick one that I know everybody's going to get right away. I think we not only have a new generation of kids on our hands today, we have a new generation of moms and dads, parents. And our scorecard, our report card, if you will, is perfect mom and perfect dad. Of course, we watch Instagram, we go, they just had the best vacation ever, so we feel this keep up stuff is going on all the time. So I don't think it's been helpful. And here's why. We have been so prescriptive in the way we've led our kids because we know best. So mom's always saying, don't forget the quiz on Friday. Don't forget grandma's birthday next Tuesday. Don't forget your backpack. Don't forget your gym shorts. So we've not let our kids own their lives as much as they should have. And maybe skin their knee or maybe forget the backpack and negotiate what needs to happen with their teacher or their gym coach. We didn't want anything bad to happen. That's normal. But wouldn't you agree, Alan? Bad things kind of have to happen for them to grow up and mature well. I
Yeah.
skinned my knee many times growing up, and I had a loving mom and dad. So Dr. Julian Rotter gives us the research on this. He, oh gosh, 70 years ago, 1954, at Ohio State University, created this scale that, Alan, you know very well. It was a scale that measured the external locus of control or the internal locus of control on kids going through the school system. And here's what it means, listeners. If I develop an internal locus of control, I basically think if it is to be, it's up to me. I'm in control of my own success, not everything around me, but my own success. I'm not going to blame my teacher. I'm not going to blame my coach. I'm not going to blame my mom. I'm going to own this. And by the way, isn't that what we all want for our kids? An external locus of control person is the one that somehow looks to outside sources for their fate and their outcomes. If my teacher would only, so nothing criminal about that, but you can see where that goes in adulthood. So Dr. Rotter, 9 years into his research, discovered predictably that those who have an internal locus of control become measurably more successful in life. They own their careers, they own their weight and fitness, they own their marriages and family. Well, Alan, as time has marched on, there's been an uptick, big uptick, and Gen Z feels it the worst on external locus. And I think it's a couple of reasons. One, they're overwhelmed with information. They look around and go, I cannot control all of this. 10,000 messages a day they're getting, if you include social media. So moms and dads, I guess the takeaway is, as they mature through elementary, middle school, and high school, we've got to pass on ownership. And even to the point of letting them have not high stake problems, but skin the knee, maybe fail a class or at least a test and say, you know what, it happened to me too. You can navigate this. So I'll stop there, but I feel like that's one of the problems that Gen Z has that maybe past generations like ours didn't have.
It is so interesting because I just recently on a podcast yesterday actually interviewed Lenore Skenazy, who wrote
Oh my God.
Free
Yeah.
Range Kids.
Yeah.
She was a hoot,
Yeah.
and if you listen to the book, it's so
phenomenal.
poetic and sort of tongue in cheek. In fact, in the interview, she said, "I used to actually write for Mad Magazine. Remember that, Tim?
Yes,
Like
I do.
Alfred E. Newman."
Yes, yes.
So, but she takes that approach where we 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 want to, and I think that's out of good intentions, right? We want to bubble wrap our kids and
Right.
preserve them, but what you said is absolutely right. We're not preparing them for the real world because
That's
we're going to get skin knees, we're going to get some F's, we're going to get some rejections, and sometimes I think we as parents, because we care so much, sometimes
yes.
we care too much, and we raise really weak people. That's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Well, and if you think about it, better to have those skin knees now when the stakes are low than 30, like our kids are at. It's like, oh, the boss doesn't care for me like mama used to care for me. Just if you just think about it, listeners, I know you do. I know you're listening to this because you care. We've got to slowly let go. And so it's a tender combination of intentionality and laissez-faire. It's really both. And Alan, you could
Interesting.
come out better than me. You've had to do this with your boys. Sometimes you let Jeffrey do his own deal, and you and Nancy are hoping to God it goes well when he jumps out into his career. And it did go well, but you had to be laissez-faire some of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to us about you had nine. Can you give us another one? And then we'll pick up your book and read the rest.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think one of my biggest preoccupations now is something I'm seeing as they move through their teenage years and they begin to transfer from backpack to briefcase. And this is kind of a new concept. I just touched on it in my book. Think about this. Um, I think teachers, coaches, and employers are seeing two big realities. The age of authority at work is going down. Kids are coming in smart as a whip, no badge, but they know stuff we don't know. But the age of maturity is going up. They may not be socially emotionally ready like maybe 40 years ago we were to shake hands, look an adult in the eye, and have a conversation. So you can see how this is troublesome to an employer. Darn it, they come in so cocky, and they should be because they know what they're doing, but yet you want to see humility and you want to see those soft skills. So I think moms and dads listening or teachers listening, we've got to listen a little bit more than we used to listen because they do know stuff we don't know, but we need to coach a little bit more than we needed to coach before to get them really ready for life. Yeah.
So interesting. So so talk more about leading these people.
Yeah.
In the workplace or even at school. How do we have to lead them differently? Maybe give us some illustrations, some
Yeah.
best practices.
Okay. Well, I think there are masquerades going on now in culture that our kids are the victim of. It's not their fault, but it's their reality. One is I think information is masquerading as experience because they have watched 14 YouTube videos or whatever. It seems like they know what they're doing, but they've watched 14 videos. It's one thing to say, I know about skydiving because I watched videos about it, or I've been Scott, you know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so I think we need to be careful to provide experiences, not just information. Here's another one that I know you all know, but social media is masquerading as community, and it's not community, at least most of the time. You might have really good, true, authentic friends on Instagram, but you probably have 500 people that you go, they're really not my friends. And Gen Z's very aware these are superficial. They'll even admit it in focus group. This is superficial. This is not real.
Huh.
So, at our dinner table, I'll tell you a funny story. You and I both, Alan, tried to develop young leaders out of our own children. We would have once a week conversations that we would use the images that I've created called habitudes. So an image would drive a conversation about character or responsibility or initiative. And I remember one time we were talking with Bethany and Jonathan about people skills and emotional intelligence. Now they were probably 12 and 8 at the time. Well, our kids both thought, I got this. I know what emotional intelligence is. And of course, Pam and I looked at each other like, oh my gosh, no, you don't, because they had discussions. And Pam and I knew we had to turn the discussion into an experience. So I'll tell you what we did. Pam and I decided we would throw a party at our house for our adult friends, and we would have our kids host the party. Well, at
I
first they
love
thought,
that.
oh my gosh, this is so stupid. Well, you know what they had to do? They had to learn to host a party to open the door. Hi, Mr. Johnson. Come on in. Have you met Mrs. Smith? Can I take your coat? Would you like some iced tea? Well, by
I
the end of
love that.
yeah, our kids were exhausted. You know, hosting a party is exhausting. At the end of the night, they thought this EQ thing is a lot harder than I thought it was. So we debriefed way past bedtime that night, but we debriefed with them, and they realized experience is different than information. And Alan, you would love this. Bethany thought, "Oh my gosh, Mr. Johnson's EQ is so low," you know. She's giving commentary about an adult, and I said, "Yeah, yeah,
That's
probably is. But
awesome.
that means you need to carry the conversation. You need to have some questions ready." The point was, though, I don't think we're brilliant, but we knew we had to turn information into experience. And that was the key to our own kids' maturation, I think.
Yeah. Well, Tim, you're a leadership expert, and you spent over 20 years working with the guru of leadership training, right? John Maxwell. And my wife worked for John alongside of you. But I think we all know at the end of the day, you can't learn leadership from a book or from a
Yeah,
seminar, right? You can learn principles,
yeah,
but you have to go apply it, which is what we're trying to do in this whole KidLead Academy. But
yeah.
I love that you did that with your kids. That's so awesome. What would be maybe a couple other practical ideas that either parents, educators, um,
Yeah.
employers, what they can do to develop these Gen Zers and also maybe even develop their leadership potential? I know
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
big convoluted question, but
No, no, and I know right where your heart is. So I want to talk about leader development. It's both maturation and leader development. Wouldn't you agree? There's a lot of going alongside of each other. So here's just a couple of thoughts that come to my mind. And I think this is at the end of the Gen Z Unfiltered book. Number one, do something scary. I think we're so safety conscious and naturally so, but I think what really turns them into leaders is when they have to do something that's not guaranteed success, that isn't good, it's all going to work out great. Mom's with me, so it's all going to be awesome. They have to do something scary. So I remember, well, I'll tell you what I did with Jonathan Allen. When he was 12, we were on a trip together up to Minneapolis. It doesn't matter where we were, but we were on a trip together. I had a rental car. And I traded places with Jonathan. And at 12, he drove the car around a parking lot, not public roads, but around the parking lot. Of course, he was scared to death. But you know what he found? I can do this. This is awesome. And then I said, Jonathan, how'd you feel when you started driving the car? He was honest. He goes, man, I panicked, Dad. I didn't think I could do it. I said, you know what you just showed me? It was in you to do it. And I said, that's exactly how you're going to feel becoming a man. You're going to think you don't know what you're doing. I didn't know what I was doing, but you showed me it was in you. So I think do something scary is what especially boys, but I think boys and girls need before they leave the house, before they're off to the university. Do something scary. Here's another one. Meet someone significant. I think I remember taking Bethany to Washington, D.C. on a trip, and it was John Maxwell was speaking at this event, and we tagged along. And Bethany was meeting Congress people, men and women that work for the government. She learned to shake their hand and hi, Mr. Whatever, and it was, but I tell you what, it was so good. By the end of the day, she's feeling probably too comfortable meeting all these guys. Tell them how to, do their job. But I think meeting someone significant, there's something that happens to their own leadership when they realize they're humans. I'm a human. I've got something to add and something to receive. So let me do one more.
yeah,
Travel,
please do.
travel someplace new. I know you guys were great at this too, but I remember with both of our kids, we did service trips or mission trips. And I remember with Bethany in 1993, if you remember, the Bosnian Serbian war was still going on back then. And we went to Croatia where a bunch of refugees were coming to stay alive. And there were camps. And I remember we passed out blankets and toys for the children and food. And Bethany was right there. She was 5 years old. And now we were with her. We didn't throw her out to the refugees. Good luck with that. But there was enough traveling to someplace new that would make her appreciate the United States of America. I wanted her kissing the ground when she came home to her upper middle class home, when she got back. but she also got to see not only poverty, but how she could serve a place in need. These things are experiences, not lectures, but they're experiences that I think just foster
Yeah.
natural process. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I, Nancy and I just went to Croatia for the first time
Oh,
this summer, and it wasn't that. But in my head, I was still seeing those
yeah.
war scenes, and now it's a hot tourist place. But
Yeah.
I love the idea that you went with them, right? And I remember you organized a trip, and I was on the team, right? So you were organizing to Romania right after Ceausescu's fall there, and they were in disarray, and the people were so starving, not only physically but starving spiritually and emotionally,
Yeah.
and the hunger. I'd never seen anything like that, and I think it's cool when your kids see you
Yeah.
involved. You're not sending them
Yeah.
to a camp
That's
or
right.
sending them to
Yeah.
service, but you're there with them, right in the soup
Yeah.
kitchen, and you're there
Yeah.
handing out food to the
Yeah.
homeless. I think that's awesome.
Well, it is. And here's a cool part of that awesomeness. I made mistakes in front of my kids trying to talk to, and so they go, okay, if that's as good as you get, there's hope for me.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
do need to be with them and go, oh my gosh, I just learned something myself at 45 or whatever. Yeah.
And
So
anything else that would be helpful, just, something that popped into your mind, but something that you've shared with others that kind of you could see the light bulbs going off in terms of how to set up our Gen Zers for success? Because, like you said, in so many ways, they have so much information, but they
yes,
also
yeah,
have so much anxiety. So,
yeah.
how can we help them?
Wow.
Last thoughts?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is Pam and I look back on our kids being under our roof in K-12. I think probably the most significant parenting decision we made that was leader development oriented was a rite of passage experience at about 13 years old. So many cultures, as you know, around the world have a rite of passage. In Africa, they do it. Jewish cultures have a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. So we did kind of our own version, but with Bethany and Jonathan, we had a boy and a girl thing on their own. But with Bethany, we arranged for 6 women to be 1 day mentors for her that 13th year of her life.
Wow.
So she was with a woman for all day long as they went to work or as they did this or that or the other. But she got to be with them. And here was the key. Every one of these 6 ladies echoed the values that Pam and I had. But when you
Wow.
go into a teenage year, you're listening to mom and dad a little less and listen to
Yeah,
everybody else a little bit more.
yeah,
We
yeah.
just wanted someone echoing, but they provided experiences and then talks over dinner. And it was phenomenal. And I
Wow.
feel like that moved them from 8th grade to ninth grade so ready for high school and just being a young lady herself or a young man himself. So the last thing we did that year was we had all the ladies over to the house. And
Wow.
after dinner, the ladies all sat around the sofa and chairs in our family room. Bethany set up a chair in the middle of the room. Now I guided her, but I was her guide, not her God. And she sat down in the chair and she had written a personal letter to each one of these ladies.
Wow.
Dear Miss Betsy, this is what I learned from you. This is how I grew. Thank you. Dear Miss Holly, dear Miss Sandra, this
Wow.
is what I learned from you. This is how my life changed. Well,
I'll
you can,
I'll bet someone cried in that circle.
oh, there was not a dry eye in the room.
How cool.
Yeah. And what was really neat, they're whispering things back to her, giving their cell number to her, that sort of thing. But the very climax of the night, after she read the letters and saw all these grown-ups crying around her, I stood up and I tried to describe what a rite of passage experience actually is. I couldn't even do it. I was such an emotional mess myself,
I'll bet. I'll
but I
bet.
didn't have to. Every one of these ladies was intuitive on what was going on. They got off the sofa and chairs, knelt down on the carpet, and looking up at our little girl, just spoke words of blessing. Bethany, you're going to be a great leader when you grow up. Bethany, you're going to be a great wife if you choose to be. You're going to be a great mom if you choose to be. Oh my gosh. It was, we saw, we saw that night our little girl just bloom and went into her high school. She wasn't perfect by any stretch. Can I do another podcast where I talk about the imperfections of our parenting? But it was
Well, what a
so,
great event.
yeah, it was. And it really,
Wow.
really think it gave her that be a thermostat, not a thermometer with your friends type of
And
feel.
and as you were describing that, and sometimes we've talked about how important it is to find mentors for your
Yes.
kids, and
Yeah.
mentoring doesn't have to be a lifetime commitment. It could be that one day that
Yeah.
you guys did.
Yeah.
But when you have another person speak into the life, it doesn't only honor the child or the teen, it honors the mentor to
Yes.
be asked to do this. What a great cool thing. So I hope that as people watch or listen, that they would think, I'm going to ask people, right? Because, and they might say, what do I say? How did you educate them, or how did Pam, set that up? Because I'm sure some people said, oh my gosh, what do I talk about, right?
What do you
Because
mean? Yeah. Yeah.
they wouldn't
Well,
be confident, maybe.
yeah, it was very, very simple, believe it or not. I called each one of these ladies up one on one, and I said, I got a wild request for you. So they were ready for anything. And I said, would you pick one day in the next 365 days that Bethany could shadow you that day? We just want her to, we respect the way you live your life. We just want her to be with you. If you go to work, take her to work. If you stay at home, keep her at home. But then I ask, during the course of that day, as you do life in front of her, would you share one life message with our daughter Bethany? A message you wish you would have heard when you were in the eighth grade and nobody ever shared it with you. That's the only instruction I gave.
Wow.
They went beyond my wildest imagination. And they knew I want to just not just talk to her, but I want to do something with her. So one flew her up to New York City for the day on a buddy pass. She was a
Oh
Delta
my
flight.
gosh.
Yeah. So that's all I ask. And they took it from there and we trusted the process. And as people of faith, we trusted God to do. And it was just so cool. So anyway, that's all I did. Yeah.
What did you do with Jonathan's? How was his different?
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you asked because it was different. You'll love this because you know Jonathan. When he was a year ahead of time, he knew it was coming. He goes, Dad, I'm trying to picture, do I just chat at Starbucks with these men? What do I? And of course, that wasn't going to fly. So what I did was I found 5 guy friends that all had boys about Jonathan's age. So they're all 12, 13 years old. And we did it together. 5 dads and 5 sons met once
Wow.
a month. And we introduced them to football coaches and business leaders and a Marine colonel and pastors but all good leaders. And they all gave them artifacts and they had a talk with them. In fact, this is kind of cool. One of our guys, because we live in Atlanta, where Chick-fil-A is based, Dan Cathy was our business leader. And
What?
he flew in on a jet because he's a pilot.
Wow.
And then all and the boys didn't know what was going to happen. So he said, guys, this is Dan Cathy, the CEO of Chick-fil-A. Oh my gosh, I love your chicken. And so he took him on the jet with him, flew him around, did the zero gravity thing, twisted, turned. The
Wow.
boys loved it. But when we got back down on the ground, we'd arranged a private room at this private airport. And Dan said, hey, boys, do you know why I could do what I just did? No, I had a flight plan. You guys got a flight plan for your life? And of course, none of them did. And he began to talk about, as a teenager, you need to begin to plan. But it was so cool because it was an experience and a discussion together. So it was 5 guys together that had this journey. And we felt like between 5 of us, we got one good brain. Maybe we can pull this off. So that's what we did.
Okay, if you're listening or watching this, if you don't happen to know Dan
Yeah,
Cathy
that's
or
right.
someone
Yeah.
who has a jet, just what Tim is saying is find people in your network.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, you
that.
got to tell that story. That's an amazing story. Both of those are amazing stories.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So one takeaway I got from the things you've been telling us is, yeah, we have to be intentional.
Yeah.
We can't just let our kids grow up on their own. And I'm not saying we smother them, but we have to be more thoughtful in
Yeah.
having those conversations, setting up those milestones, talking to them as future leaders, as young adults, and not little kids, infantilizing them.
Yep.
I take away a lot of those things, and just hearing the stories, Tim. You've always been one of the most mesmerizing speakers I've heard, and I love those stories. real stories that all of us can do. We can all do elements of that. And so I thank you for that inspiration.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to put some, how to find you and your books in the show notes and all that. But anything that you would like to tell us about an upcoming book or websites, talk to us just verbally how we can find you, just in case people are listening and they're not looking.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you, Alan. I love hanging out with you. We need to do this more often.
Yes.
We need to plan that next anniversary trip whenever,
Hey,
whenever.
when you and Dan have a plane available, just come pick us up, man.
You're open. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm actually working on a new book for employers to hire, retain, and not go crazy, with young employees.
Wow.
So I'm calling it The Future Begins with Z. But it's going to be a little ways out. But there
No,
is
wait. That's the title?
yeah, The Future Begins with Z.
I love that title.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I
Well,
put a plug in for that book, even though I've not read it yet?
yeah,
So, I work for the Naval Postgraduate School, and so my students are graduate. They're sometimes junior officers,
yeah,
sometimes government people, and sometimes middle officers.
yeah,
And all of them, I was just at Naval Academy last week talking to the officers, and so the midshipmen are the undergrad. So they
yeah,
have to teach and they have to lead the midshipmen. And the stuff that you were talking about there, they were saying the same things. It's like, oh my gosh, these people are tough. Right. These are millennials, young
yeah, yeah,
millennials.
yeah. That's right. Yeah,
These people are tough to lead because they don't respect authority like they used to,
yeah,
they'll look back at you and say, why should I do that?
yeah.
And it's dumbfounding. So
It
I
is.
think this book is going to be awesome because people all over are really trying to figure that out. How do I
It's
handle that?
so true. Yeah. So probably the best way to find me is either at timelmore.com or growingleaders.com. Both of those would be good. But what a joy to be with you, Alan. It's always fun you and I think so much alike, it's scary. So it's fun to hang out with you.
Hey, thanks, Tim. You're awesome. And hopefully we can redo this on another podcast. Maybe when the new book comes out, we'll do that
Yeah, that'd be
too.
fun.
So I believe in you and all your material is awesome. And I hope that our listeners and viewers check out Tim Elmore. He's great. So thanks very much.
You bet.